One of our listeners in Scotland wrote to me a few years ago and said if I would only preach for 15 minutes longer each week, that one sermon would get her all the way from home to the office. And so, Dr. Dean, I'm going all the way with you today. Over here at my right is a grand piano. Thank you, Charles. It has 88 keys. 52 of those keys are white, 36 of them are black. And we have the good fortune of having an outstanding pianist in our church who makes magic come out of those 88 keys every week. Doesn't use all 88 keys every week, but they are all available to him. He uses the ones that are needed in the moment. How crazy would it be if Barry came in one Sunday and said, I'm going to find the right key, and that's the only key I'm going to play today? Because there's not just one right note. At any moment, any one of those 88 keys might be the right one, while all of the others, or most of the others, are wrong in that same moment. This week, this crazy week in American history, this violent, insane, sad week, every preacher, every politician, every community leader and organizer is trying to find the right thing to say. People on social media have tried to find just the right meme, the perfect quote to speak to the nightmare of police killings and police being killed. And I don't disagree with the people who immediately quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "You cannot drive out darkness with darkness, only light can do that. You cannot drive out hate with hate, only love can do that." In fact, that's something that needs to be said. It's true, it's right. But if that's the only note that you play, then you're making even Dr. King trivial, like a needlepoint proverb on your grandmother's kitchen wall. You can make anything into a platitude, and surely in complicated times like this, something more than a platitude is called for. In the past year, 965, nearly 1,000 people were shot and killed by the police. Just over half of those had a gun in their possession. 90 of them were completely unarmed. Some of them had knives or a baseball bat or something. But 300 of those were black. So that means, considering the population percentages, that the police are 5 times more likely to shoot a black man than to shoot a white man. A black man is shot and killed by the police on average at a rate of 1 a day. If you think that anger is not one of the notes that needs to be played at this moment in American history, then I don't think you get it, because anger has to be one of our responses. The man who shot a white police officer in Dallas this week, or shot a dozen and killed 5, that was one person. That was one angry criminal murderer. But he wasn't just insane. There are reasons why he did what he did. That doesn't make it excusable. That's not acceptable in any light. I would never encourage that. Violence is always wrong. And even ironically, he shot police who were out protecting protesters who were protesting police violence. He didn't shoot the people that had shot black suspects. He shot innocent people, good people, public servants who place their lives at risk every day for the common good. Dallas, for all of its problems, and Dallas has got lots of problems, but it has one of the best records for police restraint, for training their police force to not use deadly force, for being trained in methods of de-escalation and nonviolent policing. So what he did was treacherous. It was monstrous. It was wrong. But we must not act like it just came out of the clear blue. We must not act like somehow this happened in a vacuum, because it didn't. 1 year ago, a young white racist went into the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston and shot and killed 9 people, the pastor and 8 church members. Black Christians who were not rioting, they were not looting, they weren't threatening anyone, they weren't resisting arrest, they weren't trying to run away from the police, they weren't selling CDs or loose cigarettes on a street corner, they weren't even driving a car with a busted taillight or stealing a pack of cigars from a convenience store. They were just like us. They were sitting in church, listening to their pastor. The shooter wanted to start a race war, but the surviving family members and church members immediately stepped forward and offered this murderer forgiveness, even love. That was amazing. It was brave. It was inspiring for them to have the courage and the character to step forward and not respond in retaliation, but to offer forgiveness and love. And I appreciate the fact that they played that note. I'm just saying that's not the only note to be played, even then. Anger has a place here. Fear, sorrow, grief, and rage. There are a lot of right keys in a situation as complicated as this one. Now, revenge is wrong, hate is wrong, but forgiveness isn't the only thing that needs to be said. I drove down to Charleston the week after the shooting and delivered a love offering from all of you to help that church with the inevitable expenses that followed that tragedy. And I cherish the memory of being hugged on the sidewalk in front of Mother Emanuel. They hadn't opened it yet. It was still getting the blood cleaned up and stuff. But a member of the church, one of the survivors, came out onto the sidewalk and took our love offering and gave me a hug. But I'm going to tell you the truth. Well, I hope that's what you came to hear. The truth is that I'm still mad as hell about the whole thing. That I appreciate how loving and forgiving that they were, but I'm still mad. I'm mad because it not only should not have happened, it should not have been made so easy by bought-off legislatures who have turned our cities into an American version of Baghdad, where any punk, nut job, or psycho can buy military-style weapons and ammunition that will shoot right through a car. Did you know that the police in Dallas had to hunker down behind the engine block of their cars because the bullets the assassin was using could pass right through the rest of the car? You can buy an assault-style rifle and high-powered ammunition at Walmart right next to the toy department. You can buy them at Bass Pro Shop next to the fishing tackle. You can go to the Battlefield Mall right here in Springfield and just off the food court go in an athletic store where your kids go to buy their soccer and baseball supplies and buy a military-style weapon and armor-piercing ammunition. And if you have a criminal record or some kind of official impediment to buying military-style weapons at these conveniently located retail stores, you can still buy it on eBay, or Craigslist, or at a local gun show. I recently happened to overhear a conversation among 3 attorneys, and one volunteered that he really wasn't making much money out of his law practice, but he was making a killing selling AR-15s online. He buys them from a local store, then sells them at a huge markup to someone who clearly can't buy them at a local store because they're a criminal or they're dangerous or they've got a diagnosis that would keep them from buying them, but it's entirely legal for someone to buy them and sell them to dangerous people. As the character J.R. Ewing said on the Dallas show, once you give up your integrity, the rest is a piece of cake. Now, I'm not lifting up this one snake in the grass lawyer for ridicule because honestly, all of America has given up its integrity. There was no meaningful gun control enacted after the shooting at Columbine or at the theater in Aurora. Attempts at some kind of assault rifle ban failed after Congresswoman Gabby Gifford was shot in the head. We gave away any integrity we may have had when 20 little school children lay dead on their elementary school floor at Sandy Hook, and we did nothing. A church shooting in Charleston didn't do it. A massacre in a gay nightclub in Orlando didn't do it. And now a mass killing of police officers in Dallas won't do it unless someone somewhere sends out a search party to try to find some American integrity somewhere, if there's any hiding anywhere in our legislature. Now, we have good friends of this church, Ron and June Hertenstein. Ron and June moved to Florida a few years ago and got involved in an organization called No Labels. It's a political organization that's trying to strip away the divisive labels of liberal and conservative, of left and right, of Republican and Democrat. They're trying to get good people to be good again, to tone down the rhetoric, stop the name-calling, and try to unite for the common good. And I love all of that. I love those goals. And you know, when they lived here, June was always trying to persuade me to be more diplomatic and more patient and more kind and accepting. I think she did a great job, don't you? I think we're there. But you've heard me say it right here in this pulpit. We really must end the divisions. This partisan divide has paralyzed our government and is destroying our nation. We don't need a liberal news source and a conservative fake news source. We need good, honest, factual journalists who try to inform more than they try to persuade. We need journalists that are interested in educating the public and not just selling ads by hysteria and salacious reporting. All of those are beautiful notes, good notes, noble notes, but they're not the only keys to be played right now. Americans felt justified by sending Navy SEALs and helicopters to the home of Osama bin Laden and shooting him right in the face, right in front of several of his wives. I don't like it, but I can't mount much of a defense for a moral monster that orchestrated the murder of 3,000 innocent people on 9/11. But now let's be completely honest. Since 9/11, there have been nearly 500,000 Americans, 480,000, killed by guns in the United States. Guns that are still insanely available specifically because of the gun lobbying efforts of the NRA. Osama bin Laden and his minions killed 3,000 people. The NRA has the blood of nearly 500,000 Americans on their hands just since that horrible day, 35,000 of which were homicides, more than a dozen times the number killed by bin Laden. And now Senator Mitch McConnell tells us that the Senate will not approve of a new Supreme Court justice unless that justice has the approval of the NRA. Now, why wouldn't we let ISIS appoint our next Supreme Court justice? They have not killed nearly as many Americans as are directly resulted by the facilitation of the NRA. No one in Congress has taken as much money from the NRA as our own Senator Blunt. I just received a letter this week from our Congressmember Billy Long in response to my letter to him in which I was pleading, begging for some kind of reasonable reform of gun laws, and Congressman Long told me that he would never do anything to limit the free exercise of the Second Amendment. What McConnell, Blunt, and Long are telling us is that their political bribes are more important to them than are the lives of Dallas policemen, of school children at Sandy Hook, church members in Charleston, moviegoers in Colorado, or dancers in Orlando, and a lot more than you mean to them. You look in the mirror and you say to that person, my congressman would rather I die than to lose my bribes from the NRA. And in saying that without malice, without any need for revenge, without any divisiveness or partisanship, let me just factually say that McConnell, Blunt, and Long, and all of the members of Congress who have blocked sensible gun reform and have carried the NRA's water for them do not deserve to hold public office.
Amen.
I could build a strong case for why they should be put on trial for treason against the people of the United States. Now, I don't believe in capital punishment. I certainly don't believe in political executions. But I believe that Osama bin Laden at least had convictions behind his crimes. Our elected class of criminals have less integrity than bin Laden or Saddam Hussein. Still, violence is not the answer. Retaliation is always wrong. But for God's sake, we can't keep trying to find common ground with people who only want to tear the ground out from under us. There is no middle way with moral monsters. We have to stop re-electing these minions of evil. Now, it didn't start out that way. The NRA has become a domestic terrorist organization. And I think that taking political donations from them should immediately disqualify any candidate running for office. Maybe even it should get them on a terrorist watch list or at least a no-fly list. But they sure shouldn't be sent to the Senate or the Congress to represent our children or our moviegoers or our nightclubbers or church members or police officers who are being gunned down in our streets. Finally, I must beg you to give me a little more time, to speak directly to the issue of race. There are things that need to change in America to de-escalate the violence, the crime, and the poverty. We need universal health care. There's no plausible explanation or argument against it. We need universal health care as a human right, just like public schools are available to everyone, and the fire department puts out a fire in a poor neighborhood as fast as they do in a wealthy one, I hope. We need to raise salaries to a living wage and do whatever we have to do to reach full employment, whether that's through public works projects or through aggressive job training programs and wage subsidy programs until we reach sufficient full employment. We need to strengthen Social Security so that everyone, whether they're white or black or Asian or Hispanic or Arab, can retire with dignity and confidence.
Amen.
A lot of our problems in this country are economic. They are class problems, but they're all problems that can be fixed. We have more than enough money in the United States of America to end poverty whenever we're ready. Whenever we're tired enough of it, we can end it. But economics isn't the whole picture. And that's where my man Bernie Sanders was missing the mark in the early days of his campaign. When he was initially asked about race, he immediately replied talking about full employment and a living wage, which makes a certain kind of sense to an old white man, you know, because for white folks, you can almost write off all race problems as economic. When he was confronted by the Black Lives Matter demonstrators, he replied, "All lives matter." And that seems like the right answer to white people who didn't understand the original message. Because it isn't just about economics. It's about race. It isn't even about gun violence exclusively or police brutality. It's about race. Now, I'm a pastor, so there could be nothing more natural for me than to loudly proclaim in sanctimonious, stained glass voice that all lives matter. All human life is precious and sacred, that has inherent worth. We all matter. But folks, you gotta hear me. The fact that white people matter has never been in question. There's never been a question about whether white lives matter. When white Spaniards arrived on these shores wearing armor and helmets, they would force Indians to carry them on their backs. They rode Indians like they were mules or horses until they collapsed, because it was obvious that white lives mattered. When for hundreds of years white slave ship captains brought boatloads of Africans to our shores in chains to be stripped completely naked and sold at auction on the public square of our towns and cities, sold to slave owners who worked them to death, who flogged their skin off their bones, who raped them and murdered them, it was clear white lives matter. Throughout the 20th century's American apartheid, with its segregated schools, segregated neighborhoods, segregated bathrooms, segregated lunch counters, even different water fountains, through all the lynchings and voter suppression, there was never any doubt that white lives mattered. What has been less clear is that black lives matter. And so in the face of the shooting of Trayvon Martin, who was armed with nothing more than Skittles and iced tea, by a man who was found not guilty, even though he chased him down and shot him, we begin to wake up to the fact that it cannot be assumed that black lives matter, that it needs to be said that black lives. In fact, I'd like to hear you say it. I'd like you to say it with me. Black lives matter. Now, most of us here could recite the names of the books of the Bible. If you can't, don't tell me. We could name the American presidents. We could name the capitals of our states. Wouldn't hurt us, though, to be able to say the names of the black people whose lives have been senselessly taken from them. Would you say his name with me? Trayvon Martin. Say it again. Trayvon Martin. The police were heavily armed, and Eric Garner was unarmed when the police literally choked him to death on a sidewalk in New York City. Now, the version of that murder given by the police would be all that we would know about it if it weren't for the fact that Ramsey Orta videoed the police in action. They tried to stop him, but he kept videoing the incident because he wanted people to know about it. None of the police involved in the murder of Eric Garner were even indicted. They never had to stand trial. But you know who's in prison? Ramsey Orta. It took him a month, but they found a way to charge him, and this Good Samaritan is now in jail. It isn't obvious, so we need to say it. We need to keep saying it. We need to say it loud. Black lives matter. Now, he's been dead for 2 years, but let's not forget him. Let's say Eric Garner's name. Eric Garner. 2 years ago, John Crawford picked up a BB gun off the shelf in a Walmart in Dayton, Ohio. It was on the shelf. Picked it up in the store, was walking around the store, and 2 officers shot him dead, neither of whom were charged with criminal action. Will you say John Crawford's name with me? John Crawford. 2 years ago next month, right up the road in Ferguson, Missouri, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed for walking in the street in his neighborhood when he had been told to walk on a sidewalk. The officer who emptied his revolver into Michael Brown was not criminally charged. Do you see why saying all lives matter doesn't get the point? It negates what needs to be said. Will you say Michael Brown's name with me? Michael Brown. 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed by 2 officers while he played with a BB gun in a Cleveland City park. The officers didn't even tell him to drop the gun or to raise his hands. They rolled up on him, and in less than 2 seconds, Tamir was dead. Now, that's not the way the officers described the scene. The only reason that we know any differently is because there was a video. Now, these incidents are not new. As Ta-Nehisi Coates has said, the cameras are what is new. Black people have been telling us about police shootings and violence for 100 years. We all thought they were exaggerating. We thought they were criminals and thugs who resisted arrest or who threatened the police, as if there was some mysterious nationwide century-long conspiracy that blacks in secret told each other. Well, this is the kind of story you tell. That they made up a story. The incidents are not new. The cameras are new. And the cameras are forcing us to face facts that we have long denied. We all watched Tamir Rice die. Will you say his name? Tamir Rice. Last year, Walter Scott was stopped in Charleston for having a burned-out taillight. He was about to be arrested for failure to pay child support, so he decided to run. And the officer shot him in the back while he ran away. And after he was dead, the officer picked up his taser and laid it by the body and tried to tell the story that Walter Scott had tried to take his taser from him. And only because there was a video do we know that he just murdered Walter Scott. And that officer has been charged with murder, and his trial is coming up in October, and I pray to God that there is some justice for Walter Scott. But between now and then, let's just say his name. Walter Scott. Then there was the famous case of Freddie Gray being killed in police custody in Baltimore. Several of those charged in his death have already come to trial. So far, everyone's been found not guilty. Best I can tell, Freddie Gray's still dead. Let's say his name. Freddie Gray. Now, this could go on all day. You may think it already has. But let me conclude by mentioning two more. Philando Castile was shot and killed by an officer in St. Paul in front of his girlfriend and his girlfriend's 4-year-old daughter while being entirely compliant and polite with the officer's instructions. He was a black man who volunteered appropriately that he was legally exercising his Second Amendment rights and had a gun with him. When told to show the officer his driver's license, Philando complied, but while he reached for his license, the officer shot and killed him because he was in the presence of a black man with a gun. The day before that, Alton Sterling was shot at point-blank range after being subdued. Police had him down on the ground, and they shot him 5 times for selling CDs in front of a convenience store. He has 5 surviving children. That's why I never say all lives matter. A lot of people do. A lot of black people do. Because they think they want to be inclusive, but that misses the point. The awareness that has to arise to make it possible for America to lay any claim to any integrity ever again is for us to know that black lives matter. And here's some truth for you to take home with you today. You can be entirely supportive of our police force while insisting that they come to terms with their institutional racism. You don't have to choose one side or the other. You don't have to be in favor of the civil rights of black victims or praise and support our police force. You can do both. But I want to say this to any police officer who's watching today. You know who the bad apple is on your force. You know who the racists are. You know who the violent ones are. And that clear blue line that makes you protect those racists and those violent people, you want to know what causes shootings like we saw in Dallas? It's because people protect the bad apples. That has to stop. Amen. No one wants to live in a city where there are no brave and sacrificial public servants in uniform who keep our city streets safe, but that doesn't mean in any way that we have to hold down our voices. We have to insist over and over until they understand. Say it with me. Black lives matter. In a complicated world, we have to play all the keys. the right way at the right time, the white ones and the black ones. The anger, the rage, the sadness and tears, the love and forgiveness all have a place, and we have to make them all work together to make the killing stop.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.